In local matters, Missouri's midterm elections have the attention of both the president and vice president. Vice President Pence will be in Missouri on Thursday to help fundraise for Republican Senate candidate Josh Hawley. Hawley is trying to unseat incumbent Democrat Claire McCaskill, who is considered to be one of the most vulnerable Democrats. Earlier, my colleague DeMarco Morgan spoke to political reporter Jo Mannies about the two candidates.
Political reporter for St. Louis Public Radio, Jo Mannies, joins us now. Jo, always good to see you, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for asking me.
All right, let's talk. Both parties consider this a top priority race for the midterms. Tell us what's at stake and why this election is so important.
Well, I think Missouri's U.S. Senate race could very well be among a handful that determines which party controls the Senate beginning next January. Incumbent Democrat Claire McCaskill, she's seeking a third term, and she's in one of those states where Trump did hugely well in 2016. In fact, he carried the state by almost 19 percentage points. So she's, from that standpoint, if the turnout is similar to what it was in 2016 with the same type of electorate, she could be in trouble. However, Democrats are counting on a different mix. They're counting on the Democratic rank and file being more energized. They're counting on getting more suburban women who were a key part of her 2012 re-election victory to show up, and in many cases to cross over from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party.
And
so for her, that's what she's looking at.
An interesting note here, Jo, this is one of the first candidates that we are seeing Vice President Mike Pence back since he took office. Why is Pence putting his name behind Hawley?
Well, I think for a couple reasons. President Trump already has endorsed Hawley. Trump was out here in March doing an event for Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley, who is expected to win the Republican nomination. He has a crowd of opponents in the August primary, but he's generally expected to win. He just won in 2016, and that was his first statewide office. He's a lawyer, as is McCaskill, but in Hawley's case, he used to be a clerk for Chief Justice John Roberts. So Hawley is emphasizing his legal expertise. Mike Pence was here in Kansas City last week. He's supposed to be in St. Louis in just a few days. He's going to be heading up a fundraiser for Hawley. So this is all part of the Trump-Pence focus to try to help Hawley get across the finish line. The biggest problem for Hawley is that McCaskill has been outraising and outspending him about 4-1.
Yeah, I was reading in the Times where it talked about how a lot of big Republican donors have started to join in on this race here. Speaking of money, the incumbent Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill's spending for this election has ramped up since her campaign began. Will her campaign be enough in a state that went to Trump by 19 percentage points? You talked about that.
Well, I think it depends in some ways how many other outside Democratic groups jump in to counter the outside Republican groups that are already jumping in. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, some of his PACs have been in the state. A lot of Republican PACs, outside groups are pouring in money. That could be key, especially since she has been so far so much better successful at raising money than Hawley has. For the last quarter, for example, he raised about $1.8 million, which was the best he has done so far. She raised, with everything, around $4 million. So, and that's one of the top money-raising totals in the country for the last quarter. So that helps her because that's money that she has control over. When these outside groups come in for either candidate, they don't have control over the message that those groups put out, the types of ads they run, where those ads run. So while it could be a help, it can also be a hindrance because they can't control the message. It's only the money that they have in their own campaign war chest that helps them control the message, which is what McCaskill is trying to do.
That's an important point that you make. It's always important to control the narrative there. Finally, let's take a look at some of the issues that are at play in Missouri. One of those is the trade spat President Trump had initiated with China. McCaskill has been very vocal about this issue. Let's take a listen to her speaking about it at a campaign stop.
Doesn't matter with the tariffs. People are still going to cheat. And that should be our first priority. is how can we do a better job of enforcing the laws that are on the books on a sustained basis so companies like this don't suffer. So it's having the exact opposite impact that the president said he wanted it to have.
All right, Joe, so tell us, how important is trade going to be for voters in the state?
In rural Missouri, potentially it could be very large. Aside from the snail factory that McCaskill visited and has cited, they've already laid off a couple hundred people because of the tariffs. A lot of farmers in the state are really upset because they're soybean farmers and they're seeing their markets overseas dry up because of the tariffs. So they're very, very concerned. And the key point is, these are Trump supporters. Many of those workers in that nail factory, many of those farmers who are growing the soybeans, they backed Donald Trump in 2016. So in some ways, they're hoping that somehow this can be fixed. Now, one thing that's interesting is that Hawley has not said much about this. Hawley has preferred to focus more on the new nomination of the U.S. Supreme Court nominee. He's been trying to make that an issue because McCaskill has yet to officially take a stand on Kavanaugh. So Hawley is trying to focus on that. The other key issue for McCaskill that she is driving home everywhere is health care. And she has made a point of, at every stop, at every dinner, asking people who have pre-existing conditions to stand up. And she's been driving home the point that the Trump administration is trying to get rid of protections for pre-existing conditions. She's been hammering at Hawley because he's among the attorney generals who are part of a lawsuit against the Affordable Care Act that would, among other things, get rid of the protections for pre-existing conditions. Now, Hawley, I have talked to him about this. Hawley says he does support protections for pre-existing conditions, but he says it's up to Congress to pass a law doing that. And she's saying, well, we already did with the Affordable Care Act. You're just trying to get rid of it. So there's a lot of that back and forth, and she feels that that is a strong message for her, at least right now, because that's really helping for her to galvanize middle-income elderly people and some people in rural Missouri, which are already seeing hospitals close.
All right, thank you for your insight and your expertise. Jo Mannies, thank you.
Thank you.